2025 begins, there's something I need to say. If for no other reason than I need to get some sleep. And for quite some time now, I have been tossing and turning with a lot of energy and angst and a need for it to be channeled in a direction. I started this Substack last year with the aim of creating a space where I can be as loving and honest and useful as possible, a space where I could express myself fully as I am. And it's interesting that after a, almost a year of this offering, I feel like I have done that to a certain degree, and yet there's always been a little part of me that has been holding back, resistant to really being what I'm calling everybody else to be, which is to be loved, be honest, be useful, to really be honest about who I am and what I feel I'm being called to speak and bring into the world. I realize as 2025 begins that um, this is the first moment that I really am fully um, unleashed from a traditional church body, church family, from a traditional role of serving in ministry, tied to a ministerial society. We now have something called the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative, and it is legally incorporated in the state of Massachusetts as of January 1st. And I am serving that new formed body. So I have to ask myself, what's holding you back, Sage? Why do you still feel bound? Why do you still feel scared, afraid to speak as you would, directly, honestly, vulnerably? Um, what is it I'm still afraid of? And so it seems at 2:30 in the morning, I'm recording this to try to get to the bottom of that, to break through some threshold that I know I need to break through um, for multiple reasons. But as I shared, the biggest reason for me is so that I can rest, so that I can live in my own skin. It's kind of hilarious because I can I can picture myself at 20 years old, 23, I think I was, at Urbana University in Ohio, just stumbling into my life and starting to feel this call to ministry, and how that call really started because of this great appreciation for Emanuel Swedenborg's articulation of what spiritual growth looked like. And particularly, I was drawn to the term that he used, vastation, this term that he used to describe the process of spiritual growth and its necessary inclusion of a stripping away, almost a violent sort of stripping away of our earthly self, of all that we think we are, so that we can become the person that God intends for us. I was very drawn to that term and found it very meaningful because even at 23, I had already been through a process of stripping away after leaving my family home and stepping out into the world and really struggling to figure out who I was and what this whole life thing was about. So that's what got me started on this ministry journey. It was discovering this this guy, this this mystic guy, this incredible revelator and his writings about the deep process of the spiritual life. And it was my desire to live that life that started me on this ministry journey so many years ago. And so it's a little bit hilarious now at 47 years old to be afraid. Maybe hilarious isn't the right word. Maybe it's perfect. Maybe it's just as it should be. But here I am at 47, actually going through the experience that I longed for so early on, actually going through this process of spiritual growth, of vastation, having my who I thought I was be stripped away. And I am scared about how my church will receive me. I'm scared about what this undergoing this process means for my role as a minister. Yeah, that's kind of funny. That's kind of hilarious and funny. I wonder if others, if the few humans who might listen to this get the joke. I hope some of my minister friends listen to this and they get the joke and we can talk about it. I hope. I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope and a lot of fear, and that's what I wrote about on Sunday in my Substack, kind of tentatively naming some of what I've been going through in what I hoped would be a hopeful way, a way that would others could relate to and that wouldn't be scary. One of the ethics of serving in ministry that we are taught, or that is seems to be true, is there's this ethic that when you serve as a minister, your job is to lead a community, to give inspiration and hope, and it is not okay to just, you know, throw yourself at the mercy of your community, to divulge all of your stuff, all of your issues, and to require the community that you serve to care for you. That's a really pretty central ethic to ministry, and I'm sure it's an ethic for a lot of helping professions. And so that concern is always on my mind, wanting to be careful not to step anywhere in that realm of sharing my struggles with the world in a way where others feel that they need to take care of me. And I understand the intention behind that rule for sure, in the way that ministry has been formulated thus far on the planet and how congregations have been organized, etc. And in my in these last 3 years and in the ways that I've been called, I have realized that on the other side of that coin is perpetuating this idea, that the minister is the holy shepherd, is the Jesus figure, you know. And I have witnessed so many colleagues and friends and sort of so many congregational systems, so many spaces where that having that expectation that ministers be the one that is sort of always okay, always holy, and having to protect that holiness on some level, protect a community, um, just the harm that that can create, the disconnection between people and the disconnection that can happen within oneself when filling this role. Now, many people manage it in healthy ways, all the ministers I know that are surviving and thriving, have therapists and they have other colleagues to support them, and that's all, that's working for them, and that's great. And where I am at this point in my journey, where Vastation has taken me as I have been grown by God and been called to see how I might be of use in the world in a new way, how my true self might be of use in the world, is that maybe there's another way. Maybe there's another way to be in relationship where we can be more balanced together, more whole, where we don't have to fill these roles that require us to set parts of ourselves aside. And maybe there's a way for me to be more of my full self with others. And that if my purpose, if my call as a minister is to help others grow spiritually, and I am in the process of growing spiritually, feeling this fastation in my whole being and the challenges of that, isn't the most useful thing I could do for other humans be to share the fullness of that story, the fullness of that experience as I am, the hard things and the good things? To be among the human population on a level playing field instead of this shepherd that's has these sort of ethical requirements to kind of always be okay and always take care, hold, protect. I mean, I think on some of the negative attributes of that role is that there's this idea of protecting your flock, holding your flock. I've even heard people within our community talk about that the church is a place that can kind of protect us from vastation, protect us from, why would we want to be protected from vastation? That's the whole point, right? The whole point, at least this is what I believed when I signed on to become a minister. The whole point of our lives on this planet, the whole point of the church and Jesus's message and life in the world, and Emanuel Swedenborg's writings and all the other great ones, the whole point is that we might be reborn, that we individually and collectively might change from the ground up, change as people, that we might discover a new way to be human, that we might let go of an old way and bring in a new one. That's what I'm about. That's what I've always been about. And I realize that I have not been, I've, I have made something of the ministerial role that is at odds with being about that. And maybe I'm just making it up in my head, but my sense is I've been shaped and formed to hold this role in a way that feels antithetical to living this process of spiritual growth, which is not pretty, which is not something that can be controlled or contained or easily kind of, you can't shepherd people through it easily in a Bible study or a book group. This is a process that a bigger source than me and you and anyone is orchestrating. This process of spiritual growth investation is something that God is doing in me, in in you, in humans, in people, in this collective consciousness, this world that we share, this life that we share, I should say. So while I woke up in this for, these consecutive nights, for this fear and frustration and energy, and am I going to do it wrong? Am I going to say it wrong? The battle that I am have been experiencing within of wanting to edit myself and all of these fears about speaking plainly, I could see now and think this is one of the gifts of speaking and talking and reflecting and podcasting and preaching and all the things humans do to communicate. It's helping me to see in this moment. And I already feel better. I already feel like when I'm done recording this, maybe I will sleep because I can see the absurdity of it. My friend Carl always, and others have shared this too, that when you start to uncover a false belief, it starts to feel really absurd. And that's how you know you've uncovered it. That's how you know you've maybe released it. And so maybe, oh, please God, let me finally release this ridiculous fear. Because it is ridiculous, right? I have been torturing myself, fearful that I am going to um, that I am not being faithful to my call to ministry, that I'm not being faithful to my ordination if I speak too plainly about this process of spiritual growth, fastation that I have been going through these many years, these accelerated in the fall of 2021. That if I share some of the nitty gritty of it, that um, I'm not that I'll be kicked out. I mean, really, it's an existential fear. I can feel it. It's like a fear of being burned at the stake. It's a fear of exclusion, um, the end of my livelihood, all of those things. Um, and I can see why, because what I can see why that fear is there, and I can see that probably a lot of other humans on the planet have faced this fear, held this fear, been tortured by this fear. Because what I need to say when I do speak from my experience of vestation, spiritual growth, all that I've been going through these last few years is the the truth that that happens, it's happening in me. And when it happens, when God starts to pull away, strip us of the person that we think we are, what is left is a confidence, a deep confidence that I now am grounded in, although I am sometimes scared to admit it, as I am confessing to you all today. Deep grounding in the understanding that God, who I'm declaring has been stripping away this outside person I thought I was, that the the only, or not, I shouldn't say the only, that the seat of God, the seat of wisdom, this the seat of love that I've been kind of searching for and teaching about, the seat of God is inside of me, not outside. And I'm not saying it's inside of me and then it's not in other people. It's inside of all of you as well. It's inside of us, friends. And and that's not really that like radical, like that's in the scriptures, that's in, the people have been holy ones have been teaching us this forever. And at the same time that holy ones have been teaching us this forever, not so holy ones, the people who have been bound to this earth, religious institutions, political institution, what all the institutions, and perhaps just the energy of our earthly selves has been simultaneously teaching us that we can't trust ourselves and we shouldn't, that we can't trust our own knowing of truth, of what's loving, of what's true, of what's good. There has been this air for generations, probably millennia, of suspicion of those who would claim that inner knowing, right? Am I right? Am I the only one? Many, many women were burned at the stake in this very state that I am currently residing in for having an inner knowing, for living from that inner knowing, you know, and choosing from there, choosing how to live, how to cook and speak and call call life into being. That we while holy texts and holy ones have been telling us, the kingdom of heaven is within, it's all inside, it's an inside job. Look, 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 go dig, dig, dig down deeply. The world has been terrified of that and vitriolic and violent towards those who would claim that. Unless the ones claiming that were savvy enough to start their own religion, to gather their own community around them, to form some new enclave of religious fervor. So a few, some of them survived through that protection, I suppose, of community and of others. I'm sure many have discovered this inner knowing, this seat of God and within, and lived just gone about their business and maybe not rocked too many boats and lived a good life. I think the reality is when you discover this truth, which is kind of obvious. I don't know. Let's talk about it. It's kind of obvious that the only place we could get in touch with the source of life would be within our own life, within our own heart, with our own sense of groundedness and presence. I mean, why would it be outside in some book or uh, held by some external authority? That doesn't really make any sense. Of course, it would be inside. So it's kind of obvious and it's so threatening to the status quo. And perhaps I guess, and what I'm confessing to myself and to whoever might listen, it is so threatening to the self I think I am, and perhaps the selves we all think we are, because it requires us to listen outside of our routines, of our frames of how to behave and what to do. And all of a sudden there's this new source of insight and wisdom that's not reasonable and not controllable and that and we don't know where it will lead. We don't know where it's going to take us. It's terrifying. This is terrifying. My small s self is terrified that this source of wisdom that I am starting to be in touch with, this real life that I'm starting to sense that I am, is going to just screw everything up. Or, I don't know, create a big mess or call me to do something that's going to be really, really scary, really, really out of its control. And at the same time, my small s self really doesn't have any very, very many good ideas on what to do. The way that it's been trained to live and find meaning and happiness is quickly losing credit. The the external world that I live in and the roles that we've developed and the systems and the institutions that we've created all like appear to be kind of on their way out. Like nothing's going very well in any of those institutions. So this is what's probably giving me the courage to finally to really trust this deeper knowing that is seems to be wanting to take me somewhere that I can't predict and I don't quite I can't that my brain cannot imagine. That as scary as it is, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to just keep following the rules of this world because damn, they're not really turning out so great. And I am a minister of the Christian church, the new Christian church that is proclaiming an entirely new world, a new world where we mingle together in the holy city and different people get along and co create and we have peace. How are we going to get to that world? Certainly. I have, I can, certainly, I have better odds following my soul, my heart, my deepest this deepest knowing that I'm just this intuition, this what all the words you want to call for it, this place in me that is beyond words and yet calls me to move and act and try. Certainly that part of me is going to have certainly have there are better odds that that part of me is going to be useful in leading me to this new world than my little s self with my little computational brain that keeps, you know, blending the same variables over and over again. So I'm in. I'm ready. I am I'm ready. It's the beginning of 2025 and I am ready to listen to what God wants from me. And it's not in this like, oh, God has called me and so now I will lead the people and I will set the captives free and I will me, follow sage into the unknown. I'm gonna I don't want to be, I'm not about that. I want to learn how to lead myself, my own. I would want to become the leader of my own life. I want to let this source within me become the leader of my life. A lot of spiritual teachers talk about this, and I finally get it, you know. Our brains are they're they're fabulous. They're so incredible, but they cannot be in charge of our lives. They're a tool. We are so much bigger than just our brains. And so I want my soul to be in charge of my life. I want my soul to be the leader of my life. And I am ready to trust that God is in that. God is leading my soul, which is then waking me up at 2 a.m. and making me record these kinds of conversations or whatever will come next. I'm ready to trust that. I'm ready to let go of this fear of being burned at the stake, of having my ordination taken away, of being criticized, all the things that may come from me stepping out of the traditional mode of being human, you know, all of the possibilities that may come. I'm ready to accept them. I really I really am. I think I have to. I think at this point I don't have a choice. And I trust. I really trust that this is the way, that this is the path I've been on for a long, long time. That what's happening in this moment right now is not set apart from that initial call to ministry some 2 decades ago or however long it was. That I that and this is this is where it's really important for me to describe this denomination that I'm a part of. For those who maybe don't know, this church that I was called to serve, it's not your typical church. If there is such a thing, I don't know. Maybe there isn't anymore, I don't know. But it's I wouldn't have been called to serve just any church. Already in my 20s, I was very aware of the landscape of religion and its problems. My grandfather, I shared this in other venues, you know, he was a altar boy and a very devout Catholic until he met my Methodist grandmother and was told he would burn in hell. And I'm so glad he chose my grandmother and didn't walk away from her because of what his priest said to him, you know? I get that religion has been really problematic, and I would not have been called into just any church. But I was called into this particular denomination, the Swedenborgian Church of North America, the new church, the Church of the New Jerusalem, for two reasons. One, fate. You know, my mother found the church when I was a teenager. I ended up getting really involved in the youth league and just falling in love with it. So it was fate on the one hand, and on the second hand, it was this denomination grounded in the idea that what church was, how church had operated on this planet thus far was going to change, was changing. The vision that Emanuel Swedenborg brought to the world was that a new church was about to come in, and for him it was like a new paradigm shift in what it means to be a human being. And in this new church, our faith is our life. It's not rituals or statements of faith. It's how we live in the world. And it's about being spiritually grown, experiencing vastation. All of this stuff was like totally my jam. And in this community of kind of misfit humans that call themselves Swedenborgians and gather together and do their best to live good lives. I loved I it That's my community. That's the community I've been serving in these many years. And so this is a community that should understand what I'm talking about. And I think probably one of my hopes, I have a lot of hopes and fears. That's the theme this week. One of my hopes is that my fears about sharing too much or speaking about my process and being criticized or whatever, that these fears are unfounded. That the more honest I am, the more my colleagues and friends will be like, "What are you afraid of? We're so happy to hear from you. We're not, we don't want to excommunicate you. We dig what you're up to." I have I have some hope that that may be the response from my community because I know we're really I hope that people, my other hope is that we can at least start to acknowledge that we live in some significant tension as a community. Because on the one hand, we proclaim that this new church is coming into being, it's going to be entirely new. And on the other hand, we, you know, incorporated as a religious denomination in 18 whatever. We built church buildings, we wrote liturgies, we wrote statements of faith, we gather together on Sundays. Like we're not really doing anything super duper radical as of yet. And this is the truth that I've come to see that I think is perhaps what may make some of my fears become realized of being excommunicated or pushed out, because in naming that, I know a lot of people who are a part of these churches and who liked reading their statements of faith, feel like I'm kind of out to get them, or I'm calling a bluff of some kind, and they see me as destructive of what is. I did lose my job last year, so you know that has been the response of of some people within my community. But it's a tension, friends. And if we're really going to be the Church of the New Jerusalem, if we're really going to embrace this vision, if we're really going to participate in what God is doing and be regenerated, we got to wrestle with this one. We got to wrestle with this one. And it's not enough to just sort of be quirky and, oh, we're different, but we have churches and we also do new things. It's like, I mean, maybe that's enough. I don't know. The problem with it that I see is that we still we prior we just prioritize this old model because we haven't been able to come up with a new one. And there's a lot of unspoken, this is how we do it, that happens within our denomination that doesn't create space to do new things because this is how we do it. Why is this how we do it? Isn't it time to wonder about how else we might do it? And my dream, my hope is that we can find some more ways to do it. And the reality is, we have found more ways to do it. And this is where my wall behind me and my podcast setup um, has significant meaning. I don't know if you notice all the people back here. Of course, there's Helen, who is at the lead of an example for me of a human being faithful to the vision of the new church and then living out that vision by just living an amazing life, trusting in herself. Clearly, Helen knew that the kingdom of heaven was within, that the ground of her being was good, and that she could commune with God in that ground. She speaks eloquently, beautifully of this. And from that ground, she was inspired to do all kinds of amazing things and to break all kinds of barriers and to say all kinds of hard things that nobody else dared to say. So she's my example of what it means to live a new church life. And I this Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative that I have led and am forming, my intention with this collaborative, my hope, my dream, my calling has been to create a space where many different unique individuals, just like Helen, can meet and connect and support each other through this process of vastation and spiritual growth and letting go of who we thought we are and embracing who God calls us to be and doing amazing things in the world. And maybe we'll meet on Sundays and maybe we'll meet on Thursdays and I'm not sure what we'll do yet. That's that's going to depend on who shows up. But I will tell you what we will do is we will take seriously this invitation to honor the God within each and every individual soul. We will not be dictating faith statements to each other. We will not be requiring certain ritual involvement. Nobody's going to sign on any dotted lines with blood. This is going to be a space where you are welcome to come in and bring yourself. And we'll see what comes. And our organizing principles are going to be very simply love, truth, and usefulness, which I name as be love, be honest, be useful. We're going to practice those principles together in our many myriad varied forms. So anyway, some people have been doing it, have lived this new church life, and Helen's an example. Can we create an organization that lifts up people like Helen, that allows for people like me to speak directly about my experience, that encourages others to speak directly, that doesn't seek to conform, that doesn't have a lot of unspoken rules? I don't know. I want to try. I hope others are interested in trying and will join me. And then other people on my wall are others inspired by Swedenborg. William Blake, who was there at that very first meeting in England when all those minister dudes got together to say, hey, what are we going to do with this? Should we start a new denomination? My Anglican church, they're not going to let me talk about Swedenborg much longer. I need a job. I need to feed my family. Let's start a church. And William Blake was just like, peace out. I'm not into that. I know that this new church is happening inside me, and I'm preaching it and teaching it through my art and my writing and my poetry and my life. I don't want to go build a stone church and sit in a pew. That's not that's not the invitation. And so he went off and did his thing and made an impact on the world that we all are so grateful for today. Then there's my man Johnny Appleseed over here, inspired by Swedenborg's writings and deciding to, who knows what came first, but he was into Swedenborg. He knew that there was something new coming into being, and he walked barefoot and planted apple trees and shared with the families that took him in along the way this good news fresh from heaven, and passed out pamphlets of Swedenborg's writings and apple seeds, trees that would bear fruit and feed generations of people. These are my new church family. This is my new church family. These are my friends. These are my people. These were not pew sitters. And let me just be very clear. I I don't have anything against pews. I I actually love churches and preaching, and I'm not against it. And truth be told, had this denomination that I joined up with, had we had like a little more going on, like had there been a few more congregations with a little more life in them, willing to have me as their minister, maybe I wouldn't be in this situation right now, because while it was going well, I was pretty darn happy doing my part in that way. And so perhaps it's a gift, perhaps it's a blessing that it hasn't been going so well, because it's been the portal that has forced me to really look at the whole landscape of what it means to be the church, what it means to be a minister, what it means to be a human being, what it means to be alive on this planet, and how I am called to be a part of the whole thing. And it started probably this journey, these external factors all played a role and empowered and played a role with whatever God was doing inside, it does feel like a lot of what has happened has been an inside job, a change from within. Whereas now I am I am committed. I am all in on being who I am. And part of that is probably going to look like me sharing when my little s self is scared shitless about what God is trying to call me to do. Who knows? I am I'm gonna really work at in this new year. And I guess that's my commitment to you. If you're listening to this and if you're interested in joining the collaborative, I am committed to just I'm committed to giving you the full picture, all of what I am and all of what I have to offer and what I need and what I long for. I want to bring that all to this effort, and I really want to invite others to bring all of what's on your plate and in your heart to this effort as well. And at its core, like, it's the most foundational part of this whole thing that I really hope will grow in this new year, that I really have a lot of um, that I am the most excited about is these Zoom gatherings, um, where we just are together, where we just gather in love and go like, yeah, we are all here, and something loving has brought us into being, and look, here we are. We're- We gather in love and we just speak honestly about what's going on. How are we struggling? How are we being called? What's exciting? What are we learning? Like, so many people are learning so much right now. I mean, I'm sure all of you watch YouTube, you see people out there doing similar things to what I'm doing and sharing their story, and it's so beautiful. I love it. And I would just love to have like all those YouTubers in a Zoom meeting together, or I'd like us to be all of those people. I don't think everybody on a spiritual path is necessarily going to want to start a YouTube channel. Maybe they just want to sit in a meeting and a gathering with other people and learn and share and not like teach each other or convince each other or, you know, improve ourselves, but just witness one another, love one another, and see what God is doing in the midst of that. And I have this great faith that the more of us that can kind of bring our energy to each other, our care for one another together, our honest expressions, that useful functions will emerge, new uses, new ways of being. Maybe some of us will want to build new church buildings and new pews. Maybe some of us will want to plant apple trees. Maybe some of us will want to work for disability justice. I don't quite know. Maybe some of us will want to paint and create together. So much feels possible to me. And I know a lot of people on the planet are doing all those creative things, but my sense is that there are also a lot of people on the planet that are isolated and alone and scared, kind of like I've been feeling. Scared to share their light, don't know that they should trust themselves, all that stuff. And how much more empowered might they be if there's something called the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative where they can walk in and feel themselves to belong and be supported in that process of owning and honoring and choosing and becoming the leader of their own lives. Doesn't that sound useful to you? I think it sounds good. Let's listen together, friends. Let's listen to ourselves. Let's face our fears. Let's listen to Helen. I mean, she had a lot to say. She she said a lot. She said a lot directly to us Swedenborgians, and we didn't quite listen. So let's listen to her. This Friday, in fact, with my co-conspirator, collaborator, the Reverend George Majero out in Kenya, we're going to be starting a book group of Helen Keller's Let Us Have Faith, which is I've already read it aloud on my podcast so you could listen to it. There's also, I'll add a link to this. You can access it on Google Books, I believe. It's just a short volume, 8 chapters. Let Us Have Faith. What? If you're looking for something to read, consider reading this with us. And I'll be adding some spaces where we can be in conversation about it, offering our thoughts, because it's a beautiful volume. It's a powerful volume. And she really gets at something that's really important, I think, for us to grapple with, and that's the distinction between faith and belief. When we hear about faith, we often think about faith traditions, so religious traditions that have certain belief structures. But what Helen points to is faith on an essential level, sort of faith that, which I think is really another word in some ways for what I'm talking about, this trusting in our gut, trusting in that seed of the soul within, trusting in our lives and listening to our lives and using our lives fully. That's really what she's talking about in this book. And so consider reading it with us. If you're listening to this, consider going on that journey as we start this new year together. Let us have faith, friends. Let us have faith in ourselves. Let us have faith in God and in the soul that we are, the spiritual being that we truly are. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Let us not let this human personality, this human ego, this human identity that we've created run the show. Let's let our souls lead, and let's let them lead us where we don't quite know, um, but where I trust we will find what we're actually looking for. That, and we'll find each other, and I just think it's going to be all really good. I feel so much better after speaking this aloud. And perhaps I'll get some sleep. All right, blessings, friends.
And I love it when we both are in